Death Stars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video. Welcome to episode 276 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comments and do my very best to answer them. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you would like to be featured in the video, be sure to leave your question in the comments section of this video, and hopefully I'll get round to answering your question. If you happen to enjoy the video, hit the like button down below, subscribe if you are new. And before we get on to this week's questions, I've just got a couple of things to run down. First of all, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Brian Menke and 1976 Zuckus for leaving a super thanks on my Cantina video. Thank you so much for the generosity. I really do appreciate it. And also, as you can see, I still have my Cantina on my desk where I record my videos. Two reasons for that, really. First reason, I haven't really had a chance to put it into the cabinet where I want to display it. And secondly, I just love looking at it. I really do. I love the set. I think it's fantastic. And it's such a great diorama piece. And I just really didn't want to disturb it. And I thought it'd make a pretty good backdrop for the video anyway. So if you have seen the end of my Cantina video, and if you've seen this before, I do apologise. But I just couldn't bring myself to take it apart just yet. Although I have taken down the deluxe part of it so that we get a nice good view inside the Cantina. Let me know in the comment section as well how you guys are displaying yours. Alright, with all that being said, let's get on to the first question. It's from Steve DeBursa, and he says, "Hi BB, great show this week. Now that the HasLab has been funded, it will be good to turn our attentions to Last Figure Standing over the weeks ahead. I expect that Jedis and prequel characters will feature heavily on the list this year. I would like to see Poggle the Lesser, Newt Gunray, Even Peel, Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi. It will be interesting to see how 2026 plays out with the Mando movie, Geonosis story, Rogue One 10th anniversary, and potentially some belated Andor figures. What are your hopes or expectations for 2026, and do you think we will get a preview of that in the upcoming Comic Cons in October? All the best, Steve." Alright, quite a bit to unpack in there, but first of all, bit of a plug for Last Figure Standing. We will be doing a live stream this Saturday on this channel. All the details will be on various social media, myself, John Mikos, banthskull.com if you want details of that. And essentially we're going to be launching Last Figure Standing, where you then get a chance to list your top 10 most wanted figures. Now, what do I expect? Yes, Steve, I do probably expect a few Jedi and prequel characters on there, purely because of the whole gunship thing and the fact that we know that 2026 is going to be the Battle of Geonosis. I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to have opinions of, you know, what they want to sort of fill out not only that scene, but maybe other things from Attack of the Clones. Some of the other things that you've mentioned there in terms of like the Rogue One 10th anniversary, I wouldn't say that that's going to necessarily be heavy on my list, but as always, I like to get a couple of Rogue One characters on there, purely because I'm all for sort of completing crews, completing scenes, that kind of thing. And we're missing a few of the main crew from Rogue One, so I would imagine that they're going to be on my list as well. But I don't want to spoil my whole list. That will come in the live stream on Saturday. Now, in terms of what I expect from the New York Comic Con and London Comic Con, I would expect that we might see some of the things from the things that you've mentioned there, particularly maybe something from the Battle of Geonosis, purely because if you do count up the waves, I think we're about done for this year. I think 2025 is pretty much done. I think we've pretty much had everything now. I know we've got the Darth Vader's TIE Fighter to come. Obviously, the Jedi Spirits 3-pack still needs to be put up for order at New York Comic Con, etc. But in terms of like the standard waves, I think we're pretty much done. So anything now that gets revealed will more than likely be for 2026. Now that is a bit of a scary situation, because we've got a long time until 2026 to not get a wave of figures, because they all have sort of come at once, haven't they, if you like. So hopefully the first wave of 2026 might sort of drop early, which is something that has happened in the past, and maybe sort of like, you know, middle of December, end of December, we'll get wave 1 of 2026. But I fully expect some of those at least to be revealed at New York Comic Con and MCM Comic Con. So fingers crossed for some cool stuff. mblue2321 says, great video as always. I also think Hasbro does need to make an Anakin figure on the vintage Return of the Jedi card, or maybe even on a Power of the Force card with a coin card back. Question for next week, should Hasbro make the vintage collection concentrate on adults only, seeing that kids don't play with action figures, as I've noticed with my own son? Well, to be honest, buddy, I think they're pretty much there already. The vintage collection is very rarely seen in sort of big box toy stores. You know, toy stores over here don't carry it as much as they used to do, if at all. So it is very much a sort of online product, which is obviously where adults shop, and also the price point and the way that they've moved the sort of quality of it up. It's definitely geared towards adults, and I think it's been like that for a little while now. Croix Dusud79 says, hey boss, congratulations to your videos. Question for next week, do you think since next year's focus will be on Attack of the Clones, we will at long last have brand new TVC Kaminoans? Well, I've got to say that that would be quite nice, but I think the fact that it is the Battle of Geonosis doesn't necessarily mean that the focus is going to be on the whole of Attack of the Clones. Very much like Return to Tatooine was very much A New Hope. I feel that the Attack of the Clones feature will be limited to the Battle of Geonosis. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we do get some other things from Attack of the Clones, but I feel that, you know, with all the other things that they want to put out in the year, when they're looking at Attack of the Clones, it will be centered around the Battle of Geonosis. But Kaminoans is definitely something that I feel is needed, because they haven't only featured in Attack of the Clones, they've also been in, was it the Bad Batch as well? So hopefully, you know, they are going to be on Hasbro's radar, and like anything, if that's what you want, Kaminoans, then get them in your last figure standing. Sci-Fi says, hey mate, question for next week. The latest HasLab just scraped over the line. Do you think a new business model should be introduced into how collectors back these? In Australia, we put down a deposit in a store that works with Hasbro and then slowly pay it off before release. Would this work globally? Would Hasbro get more backers? I've put it out there in the community and I've got a positive response. Your thoughts? Cheers. I think there definitely should be some kind of, you know, payment plan, essentially. And, you know, obviously, once you're signed up, you can't sort of, you know, cancel your order halfway and get all of your money back, because obviously they need to sort of have that projection of numbers. But certainly what you're experiencing in Australia would be very much helpful to other people around the world. You know, maybe even just split it into 4 payments, basically. I think that's a pretty good idea, and I think they'll probably get more backers. But I would imagine that there's probably a reason why they don't do that. Maybe they want the money up front to sort of pay for it, essentially. Who knows, man. Darth Panther says, hi BB, I was super stoked to find out the gunship was backed. Looking forward to having it in my display. I really thought at the time that we were going to miss out on it. Then I found out Tier 1 got funded too. My question for you is, do you have any idea as to how we went from being 800 backers short to having Coleman unlocked within a couple of days? Thanks for what you do. So I don't think that this has been explained by Hasbro or anything like that, but I would imagine it's probably got something to do with the international backers being added at the end. So as Sci-Fi has just said there, he's in Australia. He doesn't buy it through Hasbro Pulse. They don't have Hasbro Pulse in Australia, New Zealand. I don't think they have it in Asia anymore. So all of those backers have to back through a retail partner, which doesn't go to the count straight away on Hasbro Pulse. I think they might add them at certain periods, you know, while the backing's going on, but I think we got the extra 800 right at the end there from the international backer. Now that is just me speculating. I don't know for a fact, but this is just what I would expect. A lot of questions about HasLabs this week, as you would expect, because we've just had the gunship backing and we've also had delivery of our cantinas. And we have another question here from Christopher Demers, and he says, hey BB, question for next week. Would now be a terrible time to consider a creature like the Rancor for a TVC HasLab? It may have failed with the Black Series, but if they brought it in with reasonable price and some great figure tiers like the Rancor Keeper or a newly tooled Gamorrean Guard, I wonder if the TVC community would get behind this. Thanks for another great video. So I've got to say, with this one, I feel that one of the reasons why the Rancor failed was the initial price of it. I think they wanted $250 just for the Rancor, and then they started adding bits and pieces on after that to try and entice people in. But I think just the Rancor itself for the Black Series was $250. Now, obviously, if it was going to be in 3.75, it'd need to be a little bit smaller than that, therefore hopefully cheaper. And I think anything less than $200, it doesn't really need to be a HasLab. It just needs to be an item that's available on any sort of fan channel, whether that's Amazon, Star Action Figures over here, In Demand Toys, or Pulse itself, Big Bad Toy Store, whatever it might be, Entertainment Earth. Those sorts of places could handle that. A little bit like the Jabba's Palace playset. That kind of model that they need to sort of do a Rancor for. I don't think it really warrants being a HasLab, and I think, yeah, anything more than like $100 and $120, and then people aren't really going to be interested. We've had Rancors in the past, and even though obviously a new one would be much more articulated and detailed and things like that, I don't really see people wanting to spend more than, I don't know, $120 or something on a huge Rancor. That's just my opinion though. Just don't feel it meets the sort of HasLab grade, if you know what I mean. Sergei Halabi says, hi BB, thanks again for the cool videos. Question for next week: do you think Hasbro should release the provided Cantina figures on VC card backs with VC numbers for us collectors? So this is a tricky one, isn't it? Because whatever I say here, I'm going to upset one half of the people, because there's some people that think, you know, those figures need to be exclusive to the HasLab, that's what gives it value. And then you've got the other half of people that don't want the playset itself, that are just the carded figures, that are saying, why do you lock these figures behind expensive HasLabs? So I'm kind of somewhere in between on it. I feel that there should be some exclusivity for these HasLabs, and unfortunately that does end up tending to be figures. But I think there is a happy medium here, and I think that's the figures that like are really essential. So for example, Greedo. You don't lock Greedo behind an expensive HasLab, and I would bet any amount of money that Greedo will come out in the vintage collection on a standard different card back, probably the vintage Kenner card back at some point in the future. I think that's probably inevitable. I would even suggest that maybe Wooher could potentially do that as well. But I think when it comes to the Tonica sisters, for example, I personally feel something like that should be exclusive to the Cantina. That's probably going to upset some people, but at the end of the day, you know, it's one of those, isn't it? You have to sort of have some kind of exclusivity for these HasLabs to make them more valuable. And I'm not talking about the value on the after sale market. I'm talking about, you know, reasons to back it in the first place. Brian New says, question for next week. I'm sure it's been asked at some point, but do you think Hasbro will ever make a nice updated 21B and FX7 carded for the vintage collection? In my opinion, it leaves a gaping hole in the collection. It sure does, buddy. It does leave a hole in the collection, without a doubt. 2 figures from the original 96. So I think out of those two, 21B is the more likely one that Hasbro would get to. I will come on to FX7 in a second, but with regard to 21B, that droid, whether it's 21B or one that looks just like him, also featured in Ahsoka. So you've got that crossover for a reason why you could do that figure. You know, you could stick it on 2 card backs over a period of time and get, you know, double your money for it essentially. But with FX7 it's a little bit different, and with FX7 as well, unfortunately, I remember I think it was Chris Reef actually said that they're not even sure if that they could even make that figure anymore. And I'm not talking about a new one, I'm talking about actually just reissuing the Power of the Jedi version one that was also included in one of the vintage collection 3-packs. And that is because the factories and regulations around sort of how thin plastic can be, and he's got those little arms, doesn't he, that move, and I don't know. Whether it's a cost thing or whether it can actually physically be done anymore, I'm not too sure. But that was the reason he gave, and that is a real shame, because the FX7 is a classic vintage collection card back from the Kenner days, and it is one that the original 96 collectors are going to want. So, but we'll have to wait and see what they do with it. But essentially, I think we're probably a long way off with FX7. 21B, you know, I can't see them doing it anytime soon, but, you know, it's an easier one for them to get to, put it that way. All right, so 2 similar questions about the 50th anniversary, and one's from Collect. He says, question for next week, with the 50th approaching, do you think they will split the universe up in the waves? 3 OT, 1 PT, 1 ST, 2 Disney era, 1 animated. Personally, I'd prefer 2 from every era, but I think this is what's most likely would sell, given we get 3 to 5 waves a year, depending on when they fall, not including vehicle playsets, beasts, army builder sets. And Barada says, question for next week, there's a little over a year to go until 2027, and I'm sure Hasbro is currently working on their plans for the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, but what can really be done that hasn't already been done before? Also, do you think Hasbro will focus on A New Hope specifically, or will it be a celebration of the entire franchise like we saw in 2007 for the 30th anniversary. So yeah, it is interesting, Barada, how you put that. You say, but what can really be done that hasn't already been done before? Now, I'm not too sure if you're talking about Star Wars A New Hope, because we've literally just had this year, which has had quite a lot for that, because of the HasLab, because of the return to Tatooine. And if you take Tatooine out of Star Wars A New Hope, you're kind of left with, you know, the Death Star escape and the Death Star attack, the Battle of Yavin, essentially. So is that enough content for them to get out a decent amount of stuff in 2027 for the 50th anniversary? Or will they go with what you've just suggested there, which is, you know, splitting it up like they did for the 30th, where it's a celebration of the whole saga, the whole franchise? And if that's the case, as Collect says there, you know, will the waves be all OT, all PT? I suspect not personally. I feel that if they do, you know, celebrate the whole saga, then we will get a mixture in each waves. You might get 2 or 3 from the OT, but I feel, you know, to keep people engaged, they like to mix the waves of the content these days. They don't really want to sort of, you know, have a bunch of people saying, right, I'm not into animated, so I'm just missing that whole wave completely. A lot of people buy the whole waves, even if there might be a figure or 2 in the whole wave that they personally don't want. So I think they'll probably stick with that model, but it will be interesting to see what they do with the 50th anniversary. And I think I'm erring on the side of Barada here. I'm thinking maybe, as I just mentioned, because Return to Tatooine has had so much this year, what else is there left to do for Star Wars A New Hope? Therefore, they probably might want to sort of broaden that out and give us a bit of everything. So be really interesting to see what 2027 holds for us. Really exciting year, of course, with the 50th anniversary. And yeah, fingers crossed for some really cool stuff. Jones Boys says, question for next week. Since the Death Star is at the top of the list of so many people, but the common belief is that it would be impossible and very costly, what about taking a different crack at the idea and launch a retro collection Hasbro Pulse exclusive in 2027? Perhaps they could release either the Pie Slice 1978 Kenner Death Star or the Palatoy Half Sphere from 1978 in the idea of the Cantina Adventure set. When you're talking about the retro collection, I feel that the Palatoy Death Star is something that just needs to happen. So like, if you're a fan of the retro collection, that really does need to happen. It's classic. It would fit absolutely perfectly with the retro figures, essentially. So if you're ever going to do a playset for the retro collection, of course you could look at some of the ones that are made out of plastic. I don't know, like Yoda's hut, the US Death Star, you've got the Star Destroyer, you've got a number of other playsets that are made out of hard plastic, right? But I feel that the Palatoy Death Star is just a classic, an absolute classic, and yeah, it just fit, and they should do it. But I might add, not as a HasLab. I don't think it really needs to be a HasLab, that. I don't think you should ever really have a retro collection HasLab, personally. I don't really feel that anything there is expensive enough or detailed enough to warrant it being a HasLab. You know, just a few pieces of cardboard, that's easy enough, doesn't need to be a HasLab. Christopher Barton says, great episode, boss. Question for next week, do you think Hasbro could release individual Cantina alcoves in retail with a Patreon character included? I bought the standard Cantina and it's excellent, but I feel it's one alcove shy of being perfect. Ah, well, you should have bought the deluxe then, buddy. I'm just kidding. Also, if and when Saber Interactive finally puts out a release date for the Knights of the Old Republic remake, do you think we could see the Ebon Hawk for that next HasLab? The Ebon Hawk and crew have been on my wish list since 2003, and I believe it would be an excellent HasLab for whenever there's related media on the way. Yeah, I've got to say, that's probably a push. I really do. The Ebon Hawk. Can't see that happening ever, to be honest, but it's interesting for sure. In terms of individual Cantina alcoves, possibly, because they've got the molds for them, they could use parts of those to release other things. I don't think it's going to happen now. I think we're going to get that Alien 4-pack, and then that will be it for a little while. You might see 1 or 2 characters over the next couple of years for your Cantinas, but essentially, I think they're going to park that for a little while and concentrate on other stuff. Commander Powell says, hi B, in regards to the next HasLab, personally I would be excited for either a Sandcrawler, Imperial Shuttle or a U-Wing. However, there is a sizable portion of the community asking for the infamous HasLab of a Death Star. Question for next week, say Hasbro were to start a campaign next year for this very large and pricey monster of a playset, but they gave it say 12 months to fund. In my mind, this could serve both the purpose of essentially skipping a year to give people the chance to save, but also fund a very pricey campaign goal. Would this approach give a shot at funding a, say, $2,000 monster HasLab? Thanks. I personally don't think that would work. No, there's a couple of reasons really. First reason, I feel that the sort of marketing around that would not work at all. It needs to have that sort of urgency, that immediacy about it. And essentially, if I was to back it and then in 6 months' time something happened in my life where I needed that money, then I could cancel it. And they don't want people cancelling. So the longer you leave something running, the more chance people can change their minds and say, I don't really want that anymore, or I'm bored of the idea now. You know, it needs to be sometimes an impulse buy. So I just don't think that would work, buddy, to be honest. So we've got 2 questions here about a potential HasLab Death Star. One's from Farrell Kappa and the other one's from 88 Knight. And Farrell says, hiya Tim, thank you for all the great content and I hope your cantina has arrived by this time next week. It has. Review is on the channel. And also, check out my video where I tell you all of the characters that you need to fill out your cantina. I released that video ages ago. People are asking whether I could make a video of that, and it's already on the channel, guys. I will leave a link. I'll leave a card up there for you to check that out if you haven't done it already. If you've watched it before, then maybe you want to refresh your memory about what characters you need to populate your cantina. He says, question for next week. Do you think a possible way around the Death Star problem would be to have multiple playsets from the environment, such as a trash compactor, Obi-Wan, Vader hallway, Death Star controls, meeting rooms, the bridge where Obi-Wan shuts down the generators, etc. It would be a great way to get lots of cool figures too. So essentially 88 Knight is pretty much saying the same thing. You know, should it be like a modular thing? And the only issue that I have with that is like, how long would it take us to actually get a complete Death Star if they were to make it modular? And then also, if they were to do that, does that mean we would get no other playsets whatsoever in the next, say, 2 years? So let's just say they did, I don't know, 3 modular playsets in 2026 and 3 in 2027, and that completes your Death Star. They're all your different rooms, all that kind of stuff. Does that leave any room for any other playsets for any other things like, you know, the Battle of Geonosis or, I don't know, anything that we may want? I suspect not. So that's the problem with doing it like that. The only sort of benefit that I can see for having it done like that is from like a cost point of view, being able to spread the cost, buying it piece by piece. And of course, we don't even know if we're going to be getting a HasLab Death Star at this moment in time. So it's just one of these speculative things, isn't it? Hopefully we have. I mean, I think it's a big talking point on not just my videos, but on Facebook groups and things like that. You know, what's the next HasLab going to be? When's the next HasLab going to be? Is it going to be a playset? Is it going to be a vehicle? And if it's going to be a Death Star, you know, how would they actually accomplish that? You know, it's very interesting. I'd like to know everybody's thoughts in the comment section below. How would you prefer them to, you know, deliver a Death Star where we have not only scenes from A New Hope, but also from Return of the Jedi? Damon Whitaker says, question for next week. Recently, a person in one of the Facebook groups posted some HasLab concepts that he thought might be popular. Looking at them, I felt that some of them might have some success in the made-to-order sales model, much like the Sabine and Chopper set from when the Ghost was a HasLab. Do you think the Hasbro Star Wars team should do more of these made-to-order type figure vehicles, or are their hands tied due to it not necessarily being a Hasbro corporate policy? I personally don't think that their hands are tied, because it's not the only time. The Sabine and Chopper one was just one example, wasn't it? We got the Jabba's Palace playset. I'm pretty sure that was a window, wasn't it, that was open for you to order it, and however many orders they got, that's how many they would make. I think it opened up for order a little bit closer to the time of release as well, for people that might have missed out, but you can't get it now, I don't think. That's it, it's finished. So that was kind of a made to order as well, wasn't it? And yeah, for sure, the Sabine, Ren and Chopper 2-pack was a made to order. So I'm definitely not against that sort of thing. If that's the way they want to go, I'm more than happy for them to do that. If it means we get more stuff and the stuff that we want, then 100% I'm open to it. So we'll have to see what happens in the future. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's anything to do with a corporate policy that's holding it back, because they've done it in the past. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for submitting your questions. Please submit your questions for next week's episode. thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members for the extra support. It is greatly appreciated. Also, thank you once again for the 2 people that left a super thanks on my Cantina video. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, everybody, and we shall see you on the next one.